Welcome to the deep dive. You've given us a fascinating challenge exploring Chapter 7 of the Bhagavad Gita using quite a collection of commentaries and
Yeah,
translations.
it's a rich set of sources.
Absolutely. And our goal, as always, is to really cut through the complexities, find those core insights you're looking for, and, make it click.
Get to those aha moments without the information overload.
Exactly. Especially for you, knowing you value your time, but still want that deep understanding. So the mission today: unpack the essence of Chapter 7. What is the nature of the divine, and how can we actually know it?
Sounds good. Let's dive in.
Okay, so looking at these sources, the first thing that jumps out is, well, you can't just jump into understanding the divine, can you? There's prep work involved.
That's right. The Vedanta students' excerpts really emphasize this. They talk about jnanam, which is true knowledge, not just like book learning. And getting there requires, first, this purity of mind, chitta shuddhi. You cultivate that through karma yoga, selfless action. And second, focus of mind, chitta ekagratha, which comes from practices like upasana yoga, meditation.
Chitta Shuddhi. Okay, so it's more than just being calm, isn't it? The sources describe it as quietness, serenity, even a kind of mental suppleness.
Yes, and crucially, it's also about the absence of certain things. Ego, jealousy, hatred, those need to go.
It makes sense, because without clearing that inner space, you might get the concepts intellectually, but it doesn't really land, does it?
Right.
It's like looking through a foggy lens.
Exactly. It remains information, not true understanding, not transformation. And the sources are quite clear. Chitta Shuddhi is the bedrock of spirituality. Karma yoga, acting without obsessing over the results, is presented as the main path to that initial clearing.
Because a mind tangled up in ego and negativity just isn't going to be receptive.
It just can't be. Then comes chitta ekagratha, that ability to really focus the mind, one-pointedness, that lets you actually concentrate and absorb these deeper truths.
Yeah, you can't really meditate deeply if your mind's bouncing all over the place. And it's interesting how the Vedanta students material explicitly links this to the end of Chapter 6, verse 47.
Yes, that verse is seen as the seed for Chapter 7.
The ones saying the best meditators are those who fix their minds on the divine with faith, shraddha, and worship, bhajana.
That's the one. It sets the stage perfectly. Chapter 7 then zooms in on who this divine is, this me that Krishna starts talking about, the focus point for that devoted yogi.
Got it. And the Samskriti source mentions this fits into a larger arc, right? Chapter 7 to 12 explaining that from the Mahavakyas, the great Vedic statements.
Correct. Those huge statements like consciousness is Brahman, Tattvamasi, or that you are Aham Brahmasmi, I am Brahman. Chapter 7 to 12 are said to unpack that part. Chapter 7 kicks off that explanation.
Okay, so we're moving from preparing ourselves to understanding the object of our focus. And a key theme seems to be realizing the divine Bhagawan in two ways: transcendent and immanent.
That's a central idea.
Let's unpack that a bit. Transcendent and immanent.
Sure. Transcendent means, beyond the physical universe, beyond our normal senses. Immanent means within everything, present throughout all of existence.
Okay.
So the sources explain Bhagawan as the ultimate substratum, the Atara. Think of it as the fundamental ground the whole universe rests on, emerges from, and dissolves back into. It's the ultimate cause.
Like the foundation that everything is built upon, even if you don't always see it.
That's a decent analogy, yeah.
Yeah.
And the Vedanta students source talks about the world's splendors, the Vibhuti mountains, the sky, the cosmos, the sun's radiance.
Wow.
Seeing all these as expressions, as sort of glimpses of Bhagawan's glory.
So not separate from, but manifestations of the divine.
Exactly. And when the mind really gets absorbed in Bhagawan, the source describes this state, brahitya of Vishayantara, where everything else just falls away, all distractions gone.
That sounds incredibly focused. Deep absorption. Now, how do we actually get this knowledge? The sources mention a framework, Anubandha Chatushtayam.
Yes, that's from the Vedanta students material. It's like the 4 essentials for any effective teaching. First, the adhikari, the qualified student, which ties back to the mental purity we discussed.
Right, Chitta Shuddhi.
Then Vishaya, the subject matter itself. Here, it's complete knowledge of Bhagawan, without any doubt, asamshaya
The
samograma.
complete knowledge.
Third, sambandha, the relationship, how the teaching actually delivers the knowledge. And fourth, prayojanam, the benefit, the purpose. What do you gain?
So it's like, who's ready, what's being taught, how is it taught, and why bother? Whole system.
Pretty much. And on Sambandha, the how, it's interesting. They say the teaching itself is the means. Bojabhata.
The teaching is the means, like the path is inherent in the description of the destination.
In a way, yes. The very process of learning about the divine through this teaching is the way you come to know it. The knowledge itself is the instrument. And this leads right into verse 2 of chapter 7.
Which says,
I shall declare to thee in full this knowledge combined with realization, which being known, nothing more here remains to be known. That last part is huge.
nothing more here remains to be known. That implies total fulfillment, doesn't it?
Exactly. The Vedanta students' excerpts connect this to fulfilling our deepest human aspirations. For complete happiness, Ananda Svarupa. For complete knowledge, Chit. And for immortality or timelessness, Satyam.
Connecting to Brahman as Sat Chidananda, being consciousness bliss.
Precisely. So this knowledge isn't just another factoid. It's something that potentially satisfies those fundamental drives.
It addresses that core yearning for wholeness.
Right. And remember, the Taittiriya Upanishad says Brahman is ultimately beyond words, beyond the mind's grasp. So according to the Vedanta student source, the Upanishads often describe Brahman through the lens, or the googles, of our aspirations, because a direct conceptual definition is impossible.
Fascinating. So we have this ultimate reality, this path involving inner work, leading to fulfillment. But then the chapter introduces these two natures of the divine, para and apara prakriti. How do they differ?
Good question. Paraprakriti is the higher nature, pure consciousness, awareness itself, Chaitanyam. Aparaprakriti is the lower the realm of matter, energy, everything inert, often called Maya or just Prakriti Jadam. It's the manifold world we experience, both seen and unseen aspects.
Lower and higher. So one's good and one's bad.
Not really good or bad. They're both described as the source of everything Sarvani Bhutani. Both are aspects of the divine's creative power.
Working together somehow.
Yes. And verse 7 uses that famous analogy found in multiple sources here. The thread in the beads. Sutramani Gana Iva.
Ah, the necklace analogy.
Exactly. The unseen Paraprakriti, the consciousness, is like the thread holding together all the beads, which represent Aparaprakriti, the material world. Everything is strung on that thread of pure existence, consciousness, bliss.
That's a powerful image. Unity holding diversity. But you mentioned a limitation with that analogy.
Yes, the sources point this out. A thread is physically separate from the beads it holds. But Paraprakriti isn't separate like that. It actually pervades Aparaprakriti. It's interwoven.
Ah, okay. So it's not just holding it together, it's in it too.
A critical distinction. It helps us understand the divine not just as the container, but as the source and the substance. The Vedanta students' excerpts define the divine as both prabhava, the originating cause,
Where things come from.
and pralaya, the dissolving cause, where they return. Like clay. For a pot, clay is the source and what it resolves back into. The potter, though, is separate.
Okay.
But the divine, according to the Gita here, is both the efficient cause, the nimitta karanam like the potter, the intelligence shaping things, and the material cause, the upadana karanam like the clay, the very stuff the universe is made of.
Whoa, so the divine is both the architect and the building blocks.
That's the idea.
Yeah.
And verses 8 and 9 give examples, even things like, well, the essence of being a child or a man or a woman, the life force, the focus of a spiritual seeker, these are all pointed to as the divine.
It's really saying the divine is woven into the fabric of everything. Verse 8 is packed with examples. Taste in water, radiance in the sun and moon, the Om sound, sound in ether, virility.
It's showing that pervasiveness. Verses 10 and 11 keep reinforcing this. The divine is the eternal seed, the essence. And verse 11 is interesting about strength and desire.
Right. Of the strong, I am the strength devoid of desire and attachment. And in all beings, I am the desire unopposed to Dharma.
Yeah, so it's not just any strength or any desire. It's strength used selflessly and desires that align with righteousness, with dharma, not just raw, selfish impulses.
That clarifies things. Now, the gunas, sattva, rajas, tamas. Chapter 7 brings these into the picture as arising from the divine.
Yes, the three fundamental modes or qualities of nature. Sattva, purity, harmony, knowledge. Rajas, passion, ambition. Tamas, inertia, ignorance, delusion.
And the Vedanta student source breaks down the kinds of thoughts tied to each.
It does. Sattvika thoughts, love, compassion, serenity, focus, discrimination, detachment. Rajasika, desire, anger, greed, pride, jealousy. Tamasika, sorrow, depression, delusion.
So these gunas color our entire experience, and verse 12 seems crucial here. Whatever beings, pure, active, and inert, know them to proceed from me, yet I am not in them, they are in me. That last part.
Very important. I am not in them, they are in me. The divine is the adhishtanam, the substratum, the ground upon which these qualities play out, but remains unaffected by them.
How does that work?
The source uses the idea of atyasabhasham, superimposition, like projecting a movie onto a screen. The screen supports the images, happiness, sadness, action, but the screen itself isn't changed by that.
Ah, okay. The screen remains the screen.
Exactly. All the changes, the qualities, the drama, that's all at the level of appearance, the Vyavahardika level. But at the ultimate reality, the paramartika level, the divine substratum is unchanging. Fundamentally, the source says every bit of us is that divine reality.
So if everything comes from and is in the divine, why don't we see it? Why are we often so unaware? That brings us to delusion, Maya.
Right. Verse 13 hits this directly. Deluded by these threefold gunas. The whole world does not recognize me as distinct from them and imperishable. Our attachments, our aversions, all the characteristics of the gunas, they veil this reality.
We get caught up in the qualities themselves.
We do. And verse 27 adds another layer. By the delusion of the pairs of opposites, arising from desire and aversion, all beings are subject to delusion at birth. Our likes and dislikes, ichadesha, create this constant swing between dualities, the dvandvas.
Pleasure, pain, success, failure, praise, blame.
Exactly. And getting caught in that push-pull keeps us deluded, distracted from contemplating anything deeper. The source notes that this life, Sarge, is our chance to break free from that.
It's like we're caught in the surface waves and forget the deep ocean beneath. But verse 14 offers hope, right?
It does. Verily, this divine illusion of mine, Maya, consisting of the gunas, is hard to overcome. But those who take refuge in me alone shall cross over this illusion.
Take refuge in me alone. Mam eva prapadante. That sounds like surrender.
It leads to the concept of prapade, yes, surrender. But the source suggests true surrender isn't passive. It's an active alignment where the seeker and the goal, the surrenderer and the surrendered to, become one.
The path becomes the goal. That's deep. Okay, so taking refuge. The chapter mentions different types of people who do this.
4 types of virtuous people, yes. The arta, those in distress. The artharthi, those seeking something like security or well-being. The jingasu, the seeker of knowledge. The inquirer. And the janani, the wise one, who already knows.
The source gives examples like Draupadi in distress, Dhruva seeking a kingdom.
Right, showing people come to the divine from different places with different initial motivations. It suggests the path can begin anywhere out of need or curiosity.
But it seems the Janani, the wise one, is held up as the ideal.
Definitely. Verse 17 says the Janani excels. Their devotion is single-minded, ekabhakate. They are described as being ever in union with the divine, knowing the divine is their very own self. Their love is constant.
And the divine feels the same way.
Yes, verse 17 says, I am exceedingly dear to the wise, and he is dear to me. And verse 18 goes even further. Noble indeed are all these, but I deem the wise man as my very self. There's an identity there.
Wow. And verse 19 puts this into perspective how rare this is.
Extremely rare. At the end of many births, the wise man takes refuge in me, realizing that Vasudeva, the innermost self, is all. Such a great soul, Mahatma, is very difficult to find. It suggests this realization is often the fruit of many lifetimes of effort and purification.
Many lifetimes. It really underscores the value of human birth then as the place where this self-effort, this purushartha, is possible.
That's the traditional understanding, yes.
Now, the chapter also seems to address some potential misunderstandings people have about the divine, especially regarding avatars' incarnations.
Ah, yes, verse 24. The unwise think of me, the unmanifest, as having become manifest, knowing not my higher nature immutable and supreme.
So the mistake is thinking an avatar is just like a regular birth, thinking the unmanifest, davyaktam, just becomes limited and manifest, yaktimapanam.
Exactly. They miss the unchanging supreme reality behind the manifested form. They equate the divine appearing in form with an ordinary jiva, an individual soul subject to birth and death. The source also adds a nuance. The divine sometimes remains not known by his own will, his sankalpa.
It's like our limited minds try to box the infinite into familiar categories. So finally, how do we move beyond this delusion? The chapter seems to link it back to action.
It does. It circles back to performing punya karmanam, virtuous deeds. But with that karma yoga attitude, doing what's right because it's right, without attachment to outcomes, free from the grip of likes and dislikes. This purifies the mind.
And that purification helps overcome the delusion.
Yes, verse 28 says, those men of virtuous deeds whose sins have come to an end, being freed from the delusion of the pairs of opposites, worship me with firm resolve. When the weight of past negative tendencies, papam, lessens through virtuous action, pinyam, people become free from dvanda-moha, that delusion of dualities.
They're not constantly tossed around by pleasure and pain, success and failure.
Right. They can worship, they can focus with a steady, firm resolve because they aren't reacting so strongly to every little up and down. By consciously acting rightly, even when it goes against our immediate preference, we build that inner stability, that compass.
And that's how one progresses, from maybe starting as someone in distress, arta, or seeking something, or tharthi, towards becoming an inquirer, jingyasu, and eventually, perhaps, the wise janani.
That seems to be the trajectory implied. It's a process of purification, detachment, and deepening understanding through right action and devotion.
Okay, so let's try to wrap this up, this deep dive into Chapter 7. It's really shown us, first, the absolute necessity of that inner work, mental purity, chitta-shuddhi, and focus, chitta ekagratha. That's the foundation.
Couldn't agree more. It starts there.
Then we explored the nature of the divine itself, this incredible idea of it both transcendent, beyond everything, and immanent, the very substance and thread holding everything together, para and apar-prakriti.
The two natures forming the womb of all beings.
Right, and we saw how Maya, illusion, operating through the three Gunasvattva, Rajas, Tamas, creates the delusion, particularly the trap of the pairs of opposites, that prevents us from seeing this reality.
That ikya-devesha, the likes and dislikes that keep us bound.
But there's a path out. Taking refuge, surrender, prapati, coupled with virtuous action done with detachment, which purifies us and frees us from those dualities, leading potentially to becoming that wise janani who sees the divine as their own self, as all.
And reaching that state where, as verse 2 says, there is truly nothing more here remains to be known.
That ultimate fulfillment, such a powerful statement.
It really is. It speaks to the comprehensive nature of this knowledge.
Absolutely. So maybe a final thought for you listening. If you start to really internalize this idea that the divine isn't just out there, but is the very substratum, the thread within everything, including your own experiences, how might that change things? Could you maybe try to practice trapping the Lord, as one source put it? Noticing that underlying reality beneath the daily push and pull of what you like and dislike?
A challenging, but potentially transformative practice.
Definitely something to mull over. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.